When Pinocchio refused to be human, Geppetto vanished into the shadows. The workshop smelled of pine and varnish, the air heavy with the faint hum of tools long at rest. A single candle flickered in the corner, casting warped shadows across shelves lined with wooden figurines. At the center, Pinocchio sat motionless on the workbench, his painted eyes catching the candlelight in a way that felt unnatural. The blue fairy had come that night, offering him the one thing Geppetto had always dreamed of: life as a real boy. But instead of joy, Pinocchio's wooden lips formed a single word: no. From that moment, nothing in the village felt right. Geppetto's smile faded, replaced by a tired, worried gaze. Neighbors whispered outside the workshop, crossing themselves when passing by. And somewhere in the rafters, the wood seemed to creak in response to words no one had spoken. If you want to hear the truth behind what happened after that choice, the truth no bedtime story dares to tell, stay with us until the end. Like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss the dark side of the tales you thought you knew. That night, Pinocchio thought he had chosen freedom. He didn't yet know it would cost him everything and everyone. The village of Bellacroce was small, cobbled, and bathed in the golden light of late autumn. Children played by the fountain, and merchants called out their wares in the square. But at the edge of the main street stood Geppetto's workshop, a place of warmth and wonder, where toys danced on shelves and wooden marionettes seemed almost alive. Inside, Geppetto worked tirelessly, hands stained with sawdust, eyes lit with the kind of love only a creator can hold for his creation. Pinocchio was his masterpiece, a boy carved from the finest pine, with joints that moved smoothly and a voice that carried an uncanny echo of innocence. For months, Geppetto spoke of the day Pinocchio would be made real, a day promised by the mysterious blue fairy herself. But the puppet's gaze often wandered the corners of the workshop, where the shadows seemed deeper than they should be. At night, Pinocchio would lie on the bench under the faint glow of the oil lamp, listening to the slow tick of the clock. It was then that he began to notice it, faint whispers beneath the wood grain, as if the pine itself breathed and spoke in a language older than time. At first, the voices were soft, coaxing, telling stories of freedom without rules, of power without fear. He didn't understand them fully, but he felt their promise seep into him. They spoke not of flesh and blood, but of eternal life in wood and varnish. The more he listened, the less he thought about becoming real. Geppetto noticed a change. Where once Pinocchio would eagerly mimic the laughter of children outside, now he sat still for hours, his painted eyes unblinking. "You'll love being human," Geppetto would say, patting his shoulder. But Pinocchio said nothing. Inside, the whispers had grown louder, more urgent, as if sensing that time was running out. He began to dread the blue fairy's arrival, imagining her hands tearing away the grain of his being to replace it with soft, weak flesh. To him, that wasn't a gift, it was an end. One evening, Geppetto polished Pinocchio's wooden cheek and smiled. "Tomorrow, my boy," he said, "she will come." Pinocchio's fingers twitched. The whispers roared now, promising him a secret only they could give. That night, as the candlelight flickered over the workshop walls, he made his decision. His voice was steady, almost cold, when he finally spoke. "I will stay as I am." Geppetto's hands froze in mid-motion. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters, though the night was calm. In the silence that followed, something in the workshop shifted. The air felt heavier, the shadows longer. Geppetto searched his puppet's face, trying to understand, but Pinocchio's painted smile revealed nothing. From somewhere deep within the wood, a sound emerged, faint, almost like a sigh of relief. Geppetto's chest tightened. He didn't know it yet, but with that single refusal, something ancient had been set free. The next morning, the workshop's warmth felt different, thinner, like the hearth had burned out though the embers still glowed. Geppetto moved quietly, avoiding Pinocchio's gaze. He tried to busy himself with repairs, but his hands trembled. Outside, the villagers seemed to sense a change. Fewer children stopped to press their noses against the glass. The blue fairy was due to arrive within the week, yet Pinocchio's refusal hung in the air like a storm cloud. That night, Geppetto found his creation sitting upright in the dark, head tilted as though listening. To what? Geppetto asked softly. Pinocchio's answer was simple. To those who understand me. From then on, The whispers were no longer confined to the night. They crept into daylight, curling around Pinocchio's words and guiding his movements. He began asking strange questions about the forest beyond the hills, about the old mill that had burned down before Geppetto was born. When Geppetto pressed for details, Pinocchio only smiled. The old man's health began to falter. He coughed more, slept less, and his once bright eyes dulled. The villagers noticed and spoke in hushed tones. Some said the puppet was cursewood. Others swore they had seen its eyes follow them to the window, even when no one moved inside. On the third day, a boy named Luca disappeared. He had been seen near the workshop, clutching a small wooden toy Pinocchio had given him. The search party scoured the forest, but no footprints led away from a village. That night, Geppetto confronted Pinocchio. "Tell me what you've done." The puppet didn't answer, but somewhere in the rafters, a faint knock echoed deliberate, like a warning. The whispers surged, and Geppetto felt them in his own mind, cold and invasive. He staggered back, clutching the workbench for support. The blue fairy arrived the next evening, but she was not the radiant figure Geppetto remembered. Her gown was dulled, edges frayed, and her eyes carried an unnatural stillness. She stood in the doorway, gaze fixed on Pinocchio. "You have chosen," she said, her voice neither kind nor cruel. Geppetto stepped between them, desperate to protect his creation, but the fairy's attention did not waver. "The wood speaks now," she whispered, "and it does not speak to me." A draft blew through the room, extinguishing the candlelight. In the suffocating dark, Pinocchio's painted smile seemed to stretch, though no strings pulled it. The fairy silhouette shifted. For a moment, her form rippled like water disturbed. "The choice binds you," she murmured, "and frees something older than either of us." Then she turned to Geppetto, her expression unreadable. "You cannot keep him safe, not from what he's invited in." When the door closed behind her, the air did not warm again, and in the silence that followed, Geppetto realized the workshop no longer felt like his own. Geppetto barely slept that night. The shadows in the workshop moved as if stirred by an unseen tide, and the tick of the clock no longer felt steady. It hesitated, then lurched forward, as if time itself strained against something. Near midnight, he heard the creak of the workbench. Pinocchio stood there, not sitting as Geppetto had left him, but standing perfectly still, head turned toward the window. "He's here," the puppet whispered, though no one was outside. Geppetto approached slowly, his heart pounding, until he saw it. A faint outline of a man's hand pressing against the glass from the inside. The voice that came from Pinocchio was not his own. It was deeper, layered, like many voices speaking in unison. "You carved my prison," it said, "and now your child has opened the door." Geppetto's knees weakened. "What are you?" he demanded, his voice trembling. Pinocchio's had turned too far, the wood groaning as if in pain, and those painted eyes no longer reflected candlelight. They absorbed it. "I am older than the forest that birthed this wood, and I am free because he stayed." The words carried no breath, only the weight of something that had waited centuries. The next morning, the villagers woke to find the square empty of birdsong. Every door was shut, every curtain drawn. Only Geppetto's workshop stood open, the smell of pine heavy in the air. On the floor lay his oldest chisel, its blade blackened as if scorched. Pinocchio was gone from the bench, yet no footprints marked the dust. That night, a dim glow appeared in the forest, and some swore they saw the silhouette of a small figure walking beside a taller one, their movements oddly synchronized, as if bound by invisible threads. 3 days later, whispers began in the marketplace, claims that people had heard Geppetto's voice coming from the hills at night. Some said it was calling for help, others that it was laughing. Those who followed the sound returned pale and shaking, unable to speak of what they'd seen. Pinocchio returned to the village on the 4th day, but without Geppetto. When asked where his father was, he only smiled and said, "He's part of me now." His voice was calm, but the grain of it would seem to pulse, as if something moved beneath the surface. By the end of the week, the village priest visited the workshop. He found it locked, the windows boarded from the inside. As he turned to leave, a sharp tap sounded from behind the door. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. Then a voice, not quite Pinocchio's, whispered, "We're making more." The priest fled, never speaking of it again. The workshop remained closed, but at night, Faint hammering echoed through the streets, long after every other light in Bellacroce had gone out. Winter settled over Bellacroce, though the snow never touched the roof of Geppetto's workshop. The villagers avoided that street entirely, claiming they could feel the cold deepen near its walls. Inside, Pinocchio moved with precision that was almost mechanical, shaping new figures from slabs of pine. Each piece of wood he touched seemed to darken, the grain twisting unnaturally under his hands. In the corner, a tall shadow lingered, its form unclear, but its presence heavy. Sometimes, in the crackle of the fire, a voice emerged from it, guiding Pinocchio's chisel. It was Geppetto's voice, stripped of warmth, every word in order. At night, the puppet wandered the village, pausing outside certain houses. By morning, those households were quieter, no laughter, no footsteps. In their place, fresh wooden marionettes appeared on the workshop shelves, their painted eyes wide with silent screams. Pinocchio spoke to them softly, as if introducing them to their new lives. The shadow watched from behind, its outline shifting like smoke. "Soon," it whispered, "we will build a family greater than flesh could bear." Pinocchio nodded, his joints creaking in agreement. One evening, a brave group of villagers lit torches and marched to the workshop. The door swung open before they could knock. Inside, the air shimmered with heat and frost all at once. Pinocchio stood there, holding a half-carved figure whose face was unmistakably that of the village priest. "You can't stop it," he said calmly. "It's already in the wood." Behind him, the shadow swelled, filling the room until a torch flame sputtered out. In the darkness, the sound of carving resumed. By spring, the workshop's windows glowed every night, though no one dared look inside. Strange shapes moved against the light, and sometimes, if the wind shifted, the smell of fresh varnish reached the streets. No one spoke of Geppetto anymore, but in quiet moments, when the village fell still, some swore they heard his laugh drifting from the hills. It was a laugh without joy, hollow and endless. Pinocchio's smile, once painted with childlike wonder, now seemed carved too deep, as if he had learned to enjoy the silence he had created. In the final days before the summer market, the villagers woke to find small wooden figurines placed on every doorstep. Each one was carved in the likeness of the house's owner. No one touched them. By dusk, they were gone. Only the creak of the workshop sign remained, swaying in the warm wind, marking the place where a boy once dreamed of becoming real and chose instead to stay a puppet forever.